This is Tina Powell, host of In the Suite, where I sit down with top women leaders and some of the biggest names in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Together, we'll discover some of their best secrets and top strategies to grow a great business, build a strong brand, and lead teams in the 21st century. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their amazing personal stories of triumph, trepidation, and transformation in hopes of becoming better leaders ourselves. The time for you to lead is now, and you're in the suite. Call it luck, call it good fortune, or call it Segoy. Chelsea Emery has an incredible knack for being in the right place at exactly the right time. From accepting a role to work alongside a visionary founder, an innovative expert news engine known as Deke Digital, to running an award trade news platform at FinancialPlanning, even teaching Japanese and living in Japan, Chelsea Emery knows when to walk through doors. Chelsea Emery is a senior editor at Deke Digital, an expert news solutions company that powers national, business, and trade news pieces with expert insights, data, and intuition. The company takes its namesake from the word deke, an ice hockey technique used by a player to get past an opponent. Deke's data, editorial, and strategic capabilities help experts plan, execute, and distribute expert news that benefits readers and helps achieve business objectives. Chelsea joined Deke from her previous position as editor-in-chief of FinancialPlanning, a trade news platform focused on the wealth management industry, which he guided to the Jesse H. Neal Award for Best Media Brand in 2017 and 18. As a financial journalist, editor, and reporter, Chelsea has covered a wide variety of beats, including financial services, wealth management, markets, restructuring, corporate governance, and others during her career at Bloomberg, Reuters, and the BBC. She has a master's in international affairs from Columbia University and a bachelor's of English literature from Carleton College. She also knows how to speak with a high degree of proficiency in both Japanese and Spanish. But that's not the whole story. One of the many gifts you'll discover about Chelsea in this episode is her ability to see when a side door opens and then to have the willingness to walk through. She explains how it happened at Columbia University, Bloomberg, and most recently, Deke Digital. Her own personal stories during this fascinating discussion about digital media and news reminds us about the importance of curiosity and finding new opportunities and running with them. And Chelsea's expert advice for determining which door handle to open: find people you deeply respect and admire who can teach you things in the suite. Chelsea Emery, wow, take a seat in the suite. It's so great to have you here today. I'm so thrilled for today's discussion with you. How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
Oh my goodness. We're going to have a fantastic discussion today. And one of the reasons that I invited you in the suite is because it's not every day that you get to interview a senior editor who's part of an elite group of award-winning journalists and an expert-based digital and marketing services company that's thriving during a pandemic. Let's just face it, that's not the story for traditional media outlets. And that company is Deke Digital. And we're going to be talking about your new role as senior editor and a position that you have occupied since September of 2020. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. It's been a wild, exciting ride.
A lot of people are really thinking and contemplating where they are and maybe making a potential change. And prior to Deke, you were editor-in-chief of Financial Planning for almost 5 years, which a lot of people listening to this episode know you from your days at Financial Planning. And for those of you who are listening who don't know Financial Planning as a publication and as a media outlet, one of the most respected, prominent media properties in our industry. There's online, you have the events component, you have the print focus on financial planning, and that's a community that's reaching almost 500,000 people, professionals. And during that time, you were not only editor-in-chief, but you were also named to Folio 100 list of influential magazine editors in 2018. And also during your tenure, which this is really, really great success story here, Financial Planning won Folio's Best Website Award in 2019. You won Cebu's Award, that's a Society for Advancing Business Editing and Writing Award for General Excellence in 2019. Several prestigious Neal Awards, including Best Media Brand for 2 years in a row and Best Industry Coverage in 2019.
Tina, man, I'm going to have my daughters listen to this. They just know me as the person who dresses really badly and burns things.
This is just really fantastic. What I think that makes these accolades so impressive and important is because media is changing at the speed of light, and that you have worked through some amazing times in the industry, and to be award winning during disruptive and change with such a high velocity is something that needs to be celebrated.
Yeah, it's really amazing what's happened in media in the past 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and it can only be characterized by the word change. And I don't think that comes as a surprise to anybody, but I will say that the organizations that are thriving and succeeding like Financial Planning are the ones that have embraced every aspect of change. Events are changing, media is changing, social media is changing, and we have to be fast, we have to be adept, we have to be willing to ask our children what's happening and how they access media and what they read, and we have to be willing to move quickly. And when you see media companies thriving, it's because they have a team that's fully engaged with how stories are being told and telling them in new ways.
Yeah, and that I find is so exciting and thrilling. You've got that juxtaposition of intense change. And the fact is there's no playbook for it, because so you're building the plane, as they say, you're building the plane as you're flying it. At the same time, when things work and you see them take off, it is so exciting because it was a new idea, a collaborative process. Everybody's getting involved. I'm thrilled. I think it is a gift to be working right now during this type of change.
Exactly. And that's why my new position is so exciting, because I'm working with a founder of a company who doesn't see what's in front of him. He sees things that are 2 years out, and he's building this company on this vision of how we're going to consume and interact with information. And that's the person I want to work for.
Oh my goodness, what a gift. And some of the things that I want to bring out in today's episode is that it's not an overnight success story. And before your time at Deke Digital, before Financial Planning, you put a lot of hard work and hustle in your earlier career. Chelsea, I was really, really impressed. You spent a dozen years at Thomson Reuters. You spent time at BBC Capital. You spent a few years at Bloomberg as a stock reporter. And before that, you taught Japanese and lived in Japan for almost 3 years. So let's start with Japan. I'm so fascinated. I'm not sure everybody knows that Chelsea Emery can really speak her way succinctly, maybe not fluent, but pretty much there in Japanese and Spanish.
Arigatou gozaimashita, hontou.
Wow, that is amazing and cool.
And I'll say so demo nai desu kedo, which means really not so cool. I do the best I can.
So let's start there with Japan. Where does the genesis for that come from?
So I was thinking about this the other day, and I think that it really comes down to just seeing in your life when doors are opening and just being willing to like throw yourself through that door. So the story of Japan starts, I was a senior at Carleton College. All of my friends had these fabulous jobs as baby Wall Streeters or consultants or doing environmental work, and I had nothing. And I was in the library with my friend Yusuke. And I said, Yusuke, your dad lives in Japan, right? And he said, yes. And I said, well, can your dad help me get a job in Japan? Because I figured washing dishes in Japan was going to be way cooler than washing dishes in the United States. And so he was like, well, sure, I'll ask my dad. And within a couple of months, I had a job teaching English at Toyota and Mitsubishi and Sanyo, working with Japanese keiretsu companies, teaching them business English. And it was just that willingness to like, here's a door, go through it, see what happens. And that throughout my life, it's always just been this side door opens. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting and cool. I'm going to go through that door and see what happens.
I find that so fascinating. And one of the things, when I did my graduate work, one of my friends went to Japan because that's where her fiance was. And she came back from Japan and she's like, Tina, you're going to love it. And one of the reasons was this, Chelsea, is that she said that in Japan, even going to the 7-Eleven and buying like a pack of gum or a bottle of water, that you have this formality of expression of gratitude and thankfulness and politeness and everything that you do. And I have to imagine that being so early in your career, right in college, that being exposed to that humbleness, that genuineness really had set the stage for a fabulous career in financial services.
It is amazing to me that you pull that out of that story, because that is absolutely true. There's something about every culture where, in many ways, the culture is embedded in the language. And within the Japanese language, there is a formality, there is a respect, there's a politeness. And when you learn the language, your body changes, your posture changes, you become more sort of engaged with the other person and listening carefully to what they say. And having that at a really young, impressionable age sort of set the course. But I'd say that's true for every language.
What do they say? 80% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah, it's really true. And it's why I know there's a lot of disgruntlement about having video calls, but I like them so much better than just calls, because with this inability to talk to each other over the table right now during COVID, I think it's really important just to see each other's eyes and read each other's body language.
I'm like you. And right now, even though that this is an audio broadcast, everyone, Chelsea and I do have the luxury of actually seeing one another. And I'm so glad. It's wonderful to see your face. And it reminds me of the last time that I think that I saw you was at Disrupted Vice conference in New York City, which, boy, do I miss conferences.
Yep, I do too.
Was that a goal to be an editor from the start? When did you have that grand vision for what you could accomplish in the future?
I wish I could say it was some grand plan, but of all the listeners who are listening to us and all of our colleagues, like who really is able to follow their grand plan. Like my grand plan was to be a circus bareback rider when I was 8. So that didn't turn out right. Plans, there's no, it's just about finding opportunities and running with them. So every single time somebody offered me something new, I'd say, yeah, I'll try that. Yeah, I'll go there. Yeah, I'll write that for you. Yeah, I'll show up. Sure. I'll do that. And so it's just a matter of being enthusiastic about trying new things constantly. I wasn't good at all of them, and that was okay, because generally people tend to give you a bit of a break more than you think they're going to when you're new at something.
Yeah. And what do you look for as an editor-in-chief? You obviously have lots of people reporting to you, lots of reporters. What were those qualities, or what are those qualities that make for a really good reporter?
It's sort of like, I don't know if Venn diagram is the right word, but it needs to check off certain boxes. It has to be compelling, personal, perhaps actionable, surprising, counterintuitive, placed in the context, explaining something that you might not have understood, or going behind the scenes of something. All of those are elements of really good stories. And when I'm editing, that's what I'm looking for. And when I'm hiring people, I'm looking for people who want to hear the story. They want to hear how things work.
And from a reporter's perspective, you came from this industry as a reporter, which I love. I really feel that if you are able to manage people effectively, you have to understand what it is that they do, how they do it, and you need to put yourself in their shoes, which clearly that's what happened.
So I'm going to quote someone I worked with at Financial Planning. His name is Andrew Welsh. And he said this over and over to me. And if I were a tattoo person, I would have it tattooed on my body. It's the absolute truth of success in any career, no matter what you're doing. And it has three parts. It has 1, do your work well. 2, do it on deadline. 3, be easy to work with. And if you look around at the people you respect, admire, grow with, want to hire, want to be hired by, they look and they personify those three things.
Let's talk about that first article. That first article where you seem to hit upon something that was surprising, which made for great journalism. Nobody was thinking about day trading their student loans for the things that they wanted then. But obviously from that, created a career about covering stories that revolved around money and stock. So what caused you to stay rooted in wealth management and financial planning versus going somewhere else? Was that intentional, or was it just the luck of the draw?
I love this question so much. And the answer has 2 parts. One is that my dad was a stockbroker. So that's not the reason I'm in financial journalism. It explains something. It explains that my dad sat down with me, a girl in the 80s, and he explained stocks, and he explained bonds, and he explained money, and he explained checking accounts. And that is so important for kids so that it's not a mystery. And another part of is what I tell interns who reach out to me all the time, or people from my colleges or universities who are looking for jobs and job seekers, when they're interested in a career in journalism, I say, follow the money. And that's because in journalism, in this incredibly changing milieu of storytelling, the journalism that survives and thrives is the journalism that that people will pay for. And people who are interested in money pay to learn more about how to keep and preserve and grow their money. Financial journalism is the surest thing we have in a really unsure world.
This is already such a great episode. I never knew that about you. And see, this is the fascinating thing. I want everyone listening to just take a pause, take a breath. And if you know something about financial planning, if you are in the industry, just the very dynamic of just sitting with your family, your children, and passing upon language and making sure these are fun conversations now. It's no longer the conversations that we used to have. Now we have additional tools. We've got video, we've got media, we've got this explosion of creativity around us. Now where learning is actually fun. Like talking about money is a great conversation.
It is. So the fact that I can talk to my daughters about when they want to buy something, how much a week's allowance does it cost for you to buy that thing? That was 2 weeks of your work around the house to buy this one thing. Is it worth it? That makes it very personal for them. And I'm always trying to use financial terms and introduce them to things. I bought them Mattel stock when they were younger because they loved Monster High dolls. They don't have to be enthralled by the topic, but they have to understand the vocabulary. They have to have heard it. It's like a language when you're young. You have to learn or hear some of those terms so they're not so unfamiliar and they don't shut you down later. And I don't care who you are, how much money you make, how much money you don't make. You just have to talk about money with your kids openly and honestly.
That's great advice. I've done the same thing with my kids. You know, with any new subject, it is really about learning the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are really exciting. Had some great guests on the show to talk about that whole mother and daughter. Zenelia Harris is actually a person that comes to mind. So we talked about her lessons with Madison, and that becomes
Zenelia. She wrote for me at Financial Planning. She has an incredible story.
She really does. And we talked about just the lessons for Madison. And just like you said, Chelsea, talking about the value of money with your daughters and how much things cost and getting an understanding and a firm foundation. Because when you grow up really not needing stuff or really understanding the true value of money, it puts you in a position of power. Let's face it.
Yeah, it's true.
So your lesson about follow the money. I want to talk about your new role at Deke Digital, because you've got a lot of fans, you've got a lot of followers in the suite. And when I saw you made the shift in your LinkedIn, and then it went boom, 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 boom.
That was really fun.
Oh my God. It set off a tweet storm. It set off a LinkedIn storm in a really, really good way. And I want to understand, this is such an incredible new chapter for you. Tell us about where you were. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask, why did you leave financial planning for a new role?
So it all comes back to sort of the evolution of media. So I have known about Deke for a very long time. The CEO is someone I worked with at Reuters, and I watched this company evolve into something that was grabbing a hold of what it saw as the future of media. And part of that is the dissemination of expert voices to talk frankly, openly about the experiences they have without a lot of marketing terminology behind it. So earlier you mentioned Deke as sort of like a marketing influencer company. I'd say it's more like an expert news company. Mm-hmm. And so there's two parts to it. One is that I'm super nosy and I really like to just listen to people talk and ask them lots of nosy questions. And then I like to go and tell people what that expert said. I mean, how many times have you done that where you've talked to somebody and then you go home and you tell your kids, you tell your family, oh, this person said this thing and it illuminates everything about my life. So that's what Deke does. And that's why I was excited to join it. Deke, as part of my job, I speak to C-suite executives as though we were having beers at Davos. And I ask them all kinds of nosy questions. What do they see in the environment? Let's say it's a company that makes food, right? A food manufacturing company. I ask them about the future of food. I ask them about the future of distribution. I ask them what COVID means. I ask them about what they see in terms of their suppliers and what's coming down the pike before earnings come out and what their C-suite peers are saying. I mean, how much fun is that? And then I work with them to disseminate ideas for articles. And then together they write a piece and I edit it. And then, so I have this amazing piece on the future of food. For example, this is not a real thing, but I'm making it up. And then I know a lot of editors, right, in my career, hundreds of people, and I know what they need. They need smart, insightful content that is unbiased and not selling something. And I know that they need it right away. And I'm not going to take future of food to somebody who doesn't want that kind of article. I know who needs that article. So I place it with them. So that's a long way of saying what I do, but that's because there's not exactly a model for this. And that's what makes it really exciting.
I'm kind of thinking about it in terms of what I see as like expert storytelling. So much of what we need to infuse in our communications, online, text, articles, it was in need of an extreme makeover. We got so dry. I think playing it safe and not really expressing your values and putting out thought leadership pieces that are dry. There's not really a market for it anymore, is there?
No, you're totally hitting it on the head. We are inundated with way too much information. We're inundated with too much pablum, too many people with too many agendas behind every word that's being used. What we want is just to have that drink with that CEO at Davos. Like, we want to go to the heart of what they are seeing and hearing and use that to make really informed decisions about our own lives, our own careers, our own business directions. That is something that is very hard to find. And that's what's really exciting.
So I'm putting myself into into this sphere of influence that you're creating for your clients. And so you're sitting down. I love the beer at Davos. That's such a great analogy. And then they're writing and you're creating thought leadership pieces around really some insightful storytelling content. Where then do those pieces show up? Because I know that someone listening to this episode, we are in 328 cities and 21 countries at the time of this broadcast. And so I know someone is listening right now and saying, this sounds like something I would love to do. Can you walk us through what an ideal client profile might look like and whether or not that there's the services for everyone and where that output manifests and where we may see it?
Okay, let's talk about the output manifest for just a second, because that's really exciting. Throwing content into a swirling whirlpool does nothing for anybody, right? So what I try really hard to do is think about the ROI and where that information needs to go, both for the reader and the person who's saying it. And you can intuit it. But here's another thing that's really exciting about Deke is that we are in the process of building out technology that allows us to really determine the ROI of each piece. My intuition is okay, but it's not enough. Like, we really need to know if everybody's needs are being served by this piece of expert content or influencer articles. And so that's what we're working on.
And this is a hard part. And tell me if you find this too, because there is an unfair expectation with media. That is, from an ROI perspective, it needs to produce an immediate result, or quote unquote, it didn't work. And part of what I feel is that there's no one attribution model that says, well, that person now is either in your pipeline or became an interested prospect, or maybe a COI, maybe somebody in your life because they did all of these 50 things before they met you. And so when you look at ROI, most people in financial services look through the lens of sales and top line revenue. How do you look at it and how do you evaluate it at Deke?
So that is a hard question to answer because it has so many different layers to it, and there's so many parties to it. So the way an editor views influential, important, useful piece is completely different from how a CEO might, and the needs that they have from placing that place are really different. And what we try to do at Deke is have those things merge in a really unique way. So if you look a little puzzled, because I can see you on the Zoom screen.
No, I'm just thinking you hit it, that there's a different ROI is not this simple mathematical equation that everybody is thinking that it is. And having a different measurement depending on if you're the CEO, if you're the client. I think that putting out thought leadership is an amazing process, even internally for your own firm. Nobody wants to join a brand that's silent and shrinking. So I can imagine that your clients and that these experts, they find a new type of energy when they start to tell their stories. And that energy is a gravitational pull to the people who could potentially, be part of their company, be investors. It has a magnetic quality. We should be doing more of it. So kudos to you.
Thanks, Tina. And I think you really summed it up even better than I did. It is an ability to see the varying needs of a lot of different parties and be able to meet them.
And thank you for that. I'm being complimented by Chelsea Emery here in the suite. You're making my day right now. And I love this conversation. We could talk hours and hours on media. But I do want to get back to the founder and CEO of Deke, and that's Dave Maney, who you said that you met early at Reuters, which, wow, that's another thing, right? You never know who you're meeting, where they're going to wind up. The spontaneity of that is so fascinating.
So really quickly, so Nicole was the CEO, Nicole Volpe Miller. She was worked with at Reuters. Dave and she worked together to found Deke. So Dave, as you very well know, if you ever Google him, I know you have, if anybody else who's listening does, he's a very well-known company founder and visionary in technology.
He's all over. There's tons of videos too on him giving the economic analysis on Fox, I believe, if I did my Googling correctly here. He's also did his graduate work at Stanford. But here's one of the things that I'm really attracted to, and that is to find leadership, C-suite leadership that's bullish on technology and digital and new ways of doing things.
Okay, so I'm moving my hands in the air and jumping around in my feet, because this is where things get really exciting, is when you can take something that is so valuable to the world, which is information and media, for the lack of a better word, and then put technology around it that allows it to do its best work. And we all know that that can be used for evil as well as good. But I think having a technology background person behind a media expert news company is the now, and it's the future. Like, we have to be able to use the tech tools we have and develop new tech tools to show how information is being used, what is needed.
You've carried that ethos throughout your career, even at Financial Planning. The things that you were doing earned you a lot of accolades and then a growing audience. How are we able to change the mindset of advisors and CEOs and people in top level positions who are still a little bearish on this whole principle of digital and moving into the future? You know, what can you impart on us from those lessons and how we move people from point A to point B?
So, as editor of Financial Planning, we had a lot of articles that said, basically, if you don't adapt, you die. We all know that that's really boring and nobody wants to do it. Right? But here's what you can do as a leader, and it's baby steps, and it's being open constantly. And I'd say maybe the best thing you can do as a leader is talk to the young folks in your organization about what they're seeing, what they're doing, what they're reading, and how they're using the product that you're creating. And how are their friends using the product that you're creating? Okay, so this is really important on two levels. One, you're connecting with other people in your organization that can bring you fresh ideas. And two, you're starting to see how other viewpoints and other methods of interacting with whatever it is you're creating are being developed. And that is great on so many levels, and it's so much more actionable than like change or die.
Yeah, we've seen those messages repeated so many times. To your point, Chelsea, it is really about having a conversation about younger generations, different generations, in how they're interacting, how they're even getting news, even how news breaks. Let's spend a minute talking about how news breaks, because I'm old enough to remember when news broke, it was normally on CNN. That's where there were the big headlines, and news doesn't break like that anymore today. So, and you were on the cutting edge of a lot of those news stories early in your career, Lehman Brothers, GM, Chrysler, Tavern on the Green. You know, what can we say about how news breaks, how exciting news breaks?
So it's hard not to go on a trip down memory lane, because I was also in media at a time when breaking news was the way you paid your dues as a reporter. And so one of the most important stories that I broke during my time at Reuters, I was a defense reporter during the Iraq War, and I was covering the business of defense, Northrop Grumman and General Dynamics. And I broke the news that the Pentagon had killed the Comanche helicopter program, which was something like $36 billion program. And I got that on a tip. And then I worked with another reporter, Will Dunham, to confirm that tip, because we'd never break something with just one source. And here's what's exciting about business news, and here's what's exciting about breaking news, is that implication of that story was not just the Pentagon kills this helicopter program. It has impact for the stock. It has impact for the shareholders. It has impact for hiring. It has impact for every single element of American life in many ways, and certainly those regions where those helicopters were being produced. So that, frankly, that hasn't changed. That will always be important. The news that quote unquote breaks or that should break is the news that has the largest ripple effects and affects the most people. I think we're all inundated with push notifications all the time. Those used to be reserved for alerts or breaking news. We've come to sort of incorporate and absorb more news all day, every day. But I think intuitively we know what breaking news is.
And I think that news it breaks on social media. Now Twitter is the place, right? I saw it in the feed this week and it was really cool. This young guy he's got glasses on, he's holding a pen, and then he goes, "You probably think this is real." And he goes, "Well, it's not." And he goes, "The glasses aren't real." And the glasses come off his face like magically. It's a video. And then he goes, "And my face isn't real." So it literally like takes off his face. And he's like, "It's been computer generated by the dots that I told it to use." And he goes, "And oh, by the way, this pen isn't real either." And it was a real quick snippet. I'll see if I can get it in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen, to include in this broadcast. And it was such a powerful aha moment that it was like, yeah, how do we know? How do we discern what's real and what's not? And we look to the Chelsea Emerys of the world, the trusted news sources of the world to help create that understanding.
And Tina, I get really engaged and excited when you say that, because that's the kind of work that I am doing right now and why I'm so excited to have accepted this new position, because we aren't speaking with people who create faces out of bits and bytes digitally. I'm working with the folks in the C-suite, in the chairs, who have the most insight into the direction of every aspect of the global economy. And I'm getting their pure, unadulterated insights and disseminating that in a way that's full of integrity and truth. It's the core.
The things that I noticed is when you joined Deke, you also joined the editor-in-chief, Greg Moore, who's there, who, oh, by the way, he was the former editor of the Denver Post for 14 years, at which time he earned 4 consecutive Pulitzer Prizes. And in 2018, I saw that he was inducted into the Denver Press Club Hall of Fame. And now your role here at Deke is, wow, unbelievable that you get to work with someone like Greg on top of all of the other exciting work. Tell us how you go into that relationship, and he's the editor, and what you're planning for you, where your head is at for those first 90 days.
So along with opening doors, the most important thing I've found in building a career is finding people that you deeply respect and admire and who can teach you things. And then those people also respect you and are open to having you teach them things too. And so the fact that I can learn so much from him about newspaper reporting, about news gathering, just a really well-established editor and reporter is really exciting to me. And actually, just to tell you a little bit more about Greg, I'm going to tell you a funny story. So here's this exalted, incredible journalistic maven, right?
Yes.
I'm with him for this position. And He'd read my LinkedIn. He knew a lot about me, so he didn't bother with any of the stuff about what I've done. He asked the same question in a bunch of different ways. He was like, are you responsive? Do you file on deadline? Are you on time? Do you finish things on time? And he was just trying to get at sort of that deadline. And I mean, what editor in the world is not trying to suss out if the person who's going to work for them is going to stay on deadline? That is so important to them. So it really comes down to all the amazing things that he's done. He's also really focused on making sure that his team is working smoothly and everyone's getting what they need and they respect the process.
Speaking of deadlines, I have to just say it that even in me stalking you on your LinkedIn and reading a lot of stuff there, you have some great recommendations. And that was one of the main themes that I pulled out of your data set. The reporters said that even if they were struggling with the deadline, that you would step in and help them to meet that deadline, no matter what.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and it comes down to respect. Look, we're never going to finish everything we need to on time, but I imagine it's sort of like maybe like a tennis game in a way. There's someone on the other side of the net who cannot move forward until you hit the ball back to them. You have to get them that ball, or else they can't do their job, or they can't do it as well. And it really boils down to respect. So I try really hard to get people what they need in a timely manner so they can do what they need to do.
The importance of having that mutual respect and being able to work with people who can teach you as well as you learn something from them. It's something that we really need to focus on our own careers. As we manage our careers, it's no longer about the role, but it's what happens within the role. What does that day-to-day look like? Who are you working with? What can you learn? How can you develop? This has been a critical time for self-reflection and evaluating where you are in your life and your career.
Yeah, it really is. And the way we distribute media and consume media is as important as it's ever been in the history of the disseminated word. And the more we can use critical thinking, respect, and even technology to get the most influential voices in front of the people who need to hear the unvarnished truth, the better.
What other exciting things are going on? I would love us to be able to keep up with some of the news that's coming out of Deke. What's the best way for us to follow? You had mentioned that you're working on right now an internal technology product. That sounds really, really exciting. And then I know that as we're managing periods of change, what I love to do is I love to look at the brands that are championing that change. And Deke is one of them. So what is the best way for us to follow the news that's coming out of Deke?
LinkedIn is a really great way to start.
Great. We're going to follow the news. We'll put it in the show notes. And what can you say in terms of transitions? Because you've worked through transitions. You've gone through transitions yourself, and you make it look so easy, Chelsea.
Walk through the open doors. They're there all the time, and you don't necessarily see them. They're on the person you're sitting on a Zoom conference call with. They're sitting on the plane if travel comes back. They are in a news information bit that crosses your screen suddenly. All kinds of open doors exist. You just have to be constantly asking yourself, is this something I could do? Is this something that excites me? And the other thing, besides walking through those opening doors, is finding the people who you respect and admire you back. Fantastic
advice, Chelsea. Great. This is a power hour here. This is great. Every person needs to listen to this episode before they ring in the new year. I'm convinced that a lot of the recipes and insights that you've shared are a great way to enter and welcome into the new year and to walk through that door.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time speaking with you. This has been really engaging, and it made me think a lot. Some of your descriptions of what's happening in media, you're right on the nose.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have one last question for you. I can't wait to hear the answer from you. A lot of us in the suite have to channel that. We have to channel that we're on interview. You know, we talked about it. You had sat down with Greg and interviewing for your position and getting a feel for one another. And I'm sure that when you walked in that day, Chelsea, that you had your game on, right? Do you have a mantra, a physical object, a ritual, a practice, something that you do that gives you that boost when you're in the suite?
Oh my gosh, you know, living the life of a reporter and editor is really, you're moving all the time. So I'd say that I do have a ritual, and it's not as exciting as a mantra, but it's coffee at 3. It's a Starbucks Pike's Place tall with whole milk every day around 3. And when I started working from home due to quarantine in March, it was really hard to give up that stand up from your desk and go somewhere and drink something that made you feel good and made you feel took you away from what you were doing and nurtured yourself a little bit. And so my husband ordered me Pike's Place on Amazon, and my daughter made it in a paper cup because it tastes better in paper, and knocked on my window of my office and handed it through the office window to me. And I'm telling you, that was the best coffee I'd ever had. So I think you're really right that we do need the thing that nurtures us. And it can be a cup of coffee, or it can be a crystal, or it can be whatever, but you need that thing.
I love it. Thank you so much for your answer, Chelsea Emery. It has been a superb pleasure today in the suite visiting with you. Thank you again so much for your time and your contributions to this broadcast and just the mindset of women. Clearly, you have helped to move us forward and create a path for success in 2021. So I'm so thankful, as I know that our listeners are today, and much luck to you at Deke. I can't wait to follow your work.
Thank you. Watch us. There's some really exciting stuff coming in the next 6 months. It's going to be great.
Wait. You're listening to In the Suite, a podcast that shares amazing stories of women in business in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Our producers are Tina Powell and Kevin Hirshorn. Our editor at large is Kevin Hirshorn. Our content writers are Carmen Varner and Tina Powell. Our research and technical assistant is Rachel Powell. In the Suite podcast is sponsored by C-Suite Social Media, a digital marketing and social media agency for C-Suite leaders and companies in finance and technology. You can visit csuitesocialmedia.com to learn more. And thank you so much for listening and subscribing to In the Suite. We are so grateful to you. We've got listeners in 415 cities and 28 countries. This podcast was inspired by you ladies. So please let us know how you enjoyed this amazing episode with Chelsea Emery, and share your thoughts on LinkedIn and Twitter using the hashtag In the Suite. I would love it, and it would mean so much if you left us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this amazing episode with Chelsea. You can connect with her on LinkedIn and Twitter at Chelsea_Emery and at Deke Digital. And check out Deke Digital's website at www.deke.news. And always, if you would like to share the name of a rock star woman in financial services that we should consider interviewing in 2021, please send it to me at tina@csuitesocialmedia.com. Again, thank you so much for listening and subscribing to In the Suite.